It's been a red-hot day for pot stocks, seeing wild swings thanks to some deal talk and a big bet against the cannabis space. Aditi Roy from San Francisco to break it down. Aditi.
Hi, Melissa. Boy, was it a wild day for some cannabis stocks, with companies making moves in both directions. Let's start with the Cronos Group. The company's shares soared, ending the regular session up 11% after reports of a possible deal with Marlboro cigarette maker Altria. CNBC has learned that Altria is in early-stage talks to acquire the Canadian cannabis producer, according to a person familiar with the matter. The source also says Cronos has not agreed to any deal, and there is no certainty it will do so. The company's stock was at first halted upon the initial report before resuming trading. Then, Tilray shares also spiking upon a Financial Times report that the cannabis company is also in talks with Altria. Tilray declined to comment on the story. We've also reported that Altria is in talks with e-cigarette company Juul. The deal talks come as the tobacco industry is under a whole lot of pressure, with cigarette smoking on the decline in the U.S. Meantime, shares of Altria plummeting more than 23% in the regular session after Quintessential Capital Management and Hindenburg Research issued a note calling the company the black hole. Quintessential said it opened a short position on the stock, alleging a network of insiders at the company diverts funds away from shareholders into overvalued investments. And to that, in a statement, Altria calls those allegations false and defamatory. It also added the company is pursuing all legal options against Quintessential Capital. You may remember that Altria was also reported to have been in talks with Altria earlier this year. Melissa, back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Aditi Roy. For more on what an Altria-Cronos deal or Altria-Tilray deal could mean for big tobacco and cannabis, let's bring in Stifel's food and tobacco analyst, Growe. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
What's your view of an Altria acquisition of one of these two companies? And I asked you this because the sizes of these companies are very different. And we're talking about Cronos with a $2 billion market cap even after the rise in today's session, and Tilray is closer to $10 billion. So when it comes to making a foray into cannabis, these are very different size bets.
No doubt. And while the company can afford it with that balance sheet they have, with plenty of capacity to buy the business, I think that Altria, given the fact that this is a new category for them, and one where, you know, they bring a certain amount of expertise, obviously in the U.S., not so much in Canada, I believe they'd be looking at a smaller investment or looking at the smaller company, say Cronos, that they could learn with and then utilize, you know, potentially in the future if this ever will get legalized in the U.S.
In terms of how you view a potential deal like this, I mean, do you think, oh, well, Altria's got the regulatory aspect of this covered in terms of, you know, getting approval for various things in various states, and so it could sort of lend its expertise and help facilitate the legalization of cannabis in the U.S., and therefore it's a better investment? Or could this actually work even if cannabis in the U.S. is not federally legal?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on Cronos, but I know enough about it to say that, you know, there's obviously there's a global opportunity with that company. The problem here, of course, Altria being a U.S. only company does not have that global, you know, scale or expertise to, you know, assist Cronos in any kind of global development there. But I do think it'd be more of an opportunity around the potential future development of the U.S. market. If it would ever be legalized in the U.S., whether it be, you know, federal legalization or the States Act, whatever is, you know, the method of legalization, I believe that would be ultimately Altria's, you know, reason for taking a stake in this company here and learning about the market in advance of any potential future legalization.
Does this tell us, I mean, in terms of the reports last week that Altria could be in talks to buy a large stake in e-cigarette maker Juul, plus these reports, that Altria is really actively looking at a way to hedge what may be a declining, sharply declining core business in tobacco in the United States?
Yes, so it's a good question, and I would just say that there's been, you know, obviously FDA has regulated this tobacco industry since 2009, and while the industry has, you know, done some self-regulation prior to that, it's been a much more aggressive regulatory framework, and as you noted, that's one of the things that Altria could bring to the party here, if you will, if they were to invest in Cronos or any other company in Canada. Their lobbying power would be important. Their ability to handle the regulatory, you know, side of this and help steer the regulatory process would be very important for Altria, something that Altria could provide as well. I do think that the The regulatory side of it, though, is the piece that would make it very difficult for us to see any real near-term opportunity here. This is more of a longer-term opportunity, nothing very much in the short run, in my opinion. And I think the same goes with with the potential investment in Juul. This is a category that's fast developing.
Right.
I would note for you that Altria, has an incredible amount of technology, reduced risk technology they're trying to bring to the tobacco category, and I think some of that would apply to cannabis as well. Actually, I think some of that would apply to Juul. So they do have an ability to actually aid these investments, if they were to make them, and utilize some of their own technology and expertise that they could bring to the to both companies.
All right, Chris, thanks for your time. We do appreciate it, Chris Growe. And we got to go to Tim Seymour here. He's along a number of names, also sits on advisory boards for 3 cannabis stocks. For all of the disclosures, go to fast.cnbc.com. But what do you make of this sort of
Well, I agree that the regulatory competence Altria brings is actually great. I mean, they raised the bar. The FDA is actually comforted by Altria. They've been doing this for a long time. So I think they were also sniffing around Afria earlier in the year. So what's interesting in the cannabis space is the public-private arbitrage effectively at this point means you almost wonder why you have to go after one of the big publicly traded guys when in fact they're trading at 5-10 times more than companies of a similar size in the private market. So I would just put that out there. I also think they're not going to do anything until it's formally legal. I think that the Farm Bill and hemp being fully national is something that also gives a lot of people a chance to jump in here, someone like Altria with a national footprint, and they can be ready for when things go fully federal.